They're jacked with Pepsi.
I'm there for the pack out. You just got to pack me in.
Committed to the bow early on. Like I love getting close and putting up.
You cover a range of stuff on here too, right? Like
We call this the THP World Headquarters.
You know, my grandpa Roy Weatherby.
I came into like that golden little pocket where there was like 4 or 5 different bowls. Just
You're Canadian? We're doing a Canadian podcast?
My name's Douglas Bode.
I'm Robbie Denning.
Roy Candy.
They're not normal misses. Like I'm literally. It's like, all right, well, I don't care. You know, I got a whole bunch of targets I ordered for the Vegas rounds, just so I could practice on those backyard things. I'm not worried about my long shooting or anything like that.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
all
Yeah.
release procedure, all that crap. So it's like trying to squeeze that in. So it's like, even though I can't see the target very well, it's like I don't care. I'm going to focus on my hand. and
Yeah,
my feet
exactly.
and my, that bow. In my last shoot this weekend, I actually had to take my front stabilizer off because I was shooting consistently low. And it's because I don't have my back bar mount yet. So I got too much weight out front. Not that I have a bunch, but it's just enough. And I was screwing around with the angle of, on those Bowtechs, you can change the grip angle.
Yeah.
So I've been messing with that. It was comfortable, but I hadn't shot with it. So shooting with it, I think I had the angle out too much. So it's actually sitting in the top of my hand too much, which is very comfortable. But normally I have a little bit of heel pressure that I'm used to. So tonight I kind of backed that off. I shot one round the way that it was. And then a second round, I backed it down a bit. Now it got too dark for me to see any changes. So tomorrow I'll start again with just as it was, lots of light. See if it brings those shots up, having some heel pressure. I'm not going to, I take pictures of where I'm setting it, and I've got an app that I put my scores in, like as I'm shooting at those targets.
Yeah.
And it keeps track of it, so I can actually watch where my impacts are instead of trying to remember. I can go back to, yesterday and be like, okay, that's where I was sitting. I can put little notes in.
That's really intelligent because I don't know about you, but you can get confused of good shooting where you're shooting small groups consistently, but it's off your point of aim. And that's kind of a good distinction to make if you're scorekeeping and you're doing it for competitive use, to make sure that you're hitting the point you're actually aiming, right? Like
That's
regardless of the situation, right? So making sure that you're range finding and calibrating your bow and what the ranges you're trying to shoot at with your rangefinder, not some
That's right.
other like even just if it's a validated range, well, that matters and you should trust that. But at the same time, it's not validated to what you're going to be measuring the range off of.
Yeah.
So those little differences, right? Because
We've all
that's
seen
the
it
thing,
a
right?
couple of yards, even 1 yard off. Well, that could be big if you're shooting a little farther.
Yeah, I'm
Like up
grouping
close.
well, but I'm not hitting exactly
Yeah.
where I
And
want.
these are grouping nice in my backyard. I'm happy with the grouping
Yeah.
at 20 yards at what I'm trying to accomplish there. And honestly, where I'm hitting, I'd be racking it up on 3D. If we were in 3D, I'd be hammering it out. But I'm not quite happy because I know I'm out an inch, so to speak. The group is there, and we're not talking. I've already done this horizontal, so I already know where my 20 pin is. So what it is it's the way I'm holding the bow now. It's my heel pressure. So it's trying to get that all consistent, comfortable, set in stone. And then once I'm there, I can go back and confirm everything else. I just don't have enough time. I had this registered shoot yesterday, and, I just got the strings on, and I just got my arrows noctuned the other day, So I had like 3 days to shoot with fletchings, and regionals are next weekend. It's like, whatever. I'm going into it. I'm going to try. But these are all, there's no point in forcing it, is basically what I'm getting at. It's know what you're going into, do the best you can, pay attention to the equipment and any changes you make to see what, for good or bad.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, well, fuck it. Next year there'll be regionals again next year and that kind of thing. But it'll be kind of setting up for outdoor 3D here and just picking away at it, getting everything set up so you understand the equipment that you're dealing with. Because this bow is totally new. I've never had this much adjustability and customization.
Yeah.
in my hands before. And it's like, well, I might as well utilize it, take my time with it because I'm going to have it for a while.
Yeah, and you're doing things right. Being able to exploit all of the advantages in each category and having a specific built, set up target
Yeah,
bow, you're going to really be able to maximize that performance versus a hunting setup. You're always kind of compromising on weight and
that's right.
shootability and power and draw weights, and you still want it to be resembling what you're going to be hunting with. And once you set it up for hunting, it kind of stays that way, and it's not
Yeah,
necessarily geared towards maximum accuracy for target.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I honestly, I got my brand new set of strings from the bowstring company. They're hanging up on my pegboard right now because I was like,
Yeah.
let's get one bow done
Yeah.
and then we can work on the other. And then while I'm tweaking with the other one and, doing changes, I got my solid bow that I can go outside, get my good reps in,
Hmm.
and then I can work on the second bow until it's good. And then I'll just flip flop. I won't care.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just taking my time because otherwise, 3D season's going to come up, bear season's going to come up quicker than we all think.
Yeah,
And
that's crazy. That's not that far away.
no, it's not.
No. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot of
Yeah.
shooting to be done, irregardless. And I don't care if you're rifle, archery, whatever. If you got to
Yeah.
prep for whatever kind of weapon you're going to use or however you're going to go out, get out there because it's coming fast.
I would rather do a slow crawl to the finish line instead of rushing something because I feel like reaping the reward of understanding each process within the processes is really critical to just overall like the satisfaction you get from a win. Like you got there because of all these steps that led to the finish line, not just some, to be honest, fucking luck, right? Like, 'cause
Yeah.
everybody has their day where they're the stud, they can't
Oh,
miss,
yeah.
right? But I think to have that consistent success where you're kind of always inching towards being the best you can, if you're not breaking down this shit, I think personally you're kind of wasting your time because you're not getting the most out of each learning experience, especially when you start tinkering with equipment and changing your form, seeing if this is better, that's better. You have to take your time because if you introduce too many factors, let me break it down. I used to shoot it was like every Monday and Wednesday with a guy. We both reloaded. We'd shoot good groups. We just shoot and shoot and shoot. But we never had the mentality because we were young. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. We were just getting into target shooting where you're just measuring groups of like really understanding how the hell you shot the group. That was great.
Which is kind of important.
Yeah, it's kind of important, right? Like not the like mental checklist type mentality, like, holy fuck, I shot a good group. Well, can you do it again? Well, I don't know, not really. Because I didn't really I
Yeah.
never there was no process, right? There's no process behind any of this. It was just, oh, I shot some good groups. Okay. But can you replicate that success? That's what's really important. And that's where the training and, like you say, like meticulously tweaking it for your personalized shooting style instead of someone else's or just the tune, just messing with grip angles, messing with timing. Do you want your top cam or do you want a knock high or stabilizers and just aiming? I think aiming is really like once you get past the tuning part, aiming, how your bow
Oh,
aims is so much more critical than anything else. It's just because then that is automatic, and then you're not fighting, keeping it level, and fighting the rest of your form, and staying in the shot too long, holding a draw too long.
and do that
Uh,
stuff without all the accessories. Like I actually
yeah,
watched. I've seen there's a couple really good videos out there. Paige Pierce does a couple really good ones on finding your D loop height. Like no stabilizers. You're not trying to compensate with stabilizers. You're trying
no,
to
you add
make
them
it as
after.
forgiving as you
Yeah,
can before you add anything. And literally you're tying your D loop on, no soft knocks or anything like that. And that's just to allow you to spin the D loop up
yeah,
and down. And all you're doing is pulling. You can do it in your basement. You don't need 20 yards. You don't need 40 yards. And
yeah,
because you're only watching your pin float and stuff like that. And what works for me doesn't work for you. So it's literally you have to do it. I can't hold it, do it, give it to you and be like, that's good. You literally have to do it on your own because we're all a little different the way we hold it, everything. So I went through that process for the first time. I just learned all this stuff and, another rabbit hole. And then you're like, whoa, what else will
Yeah,
make these
exactly.
little great changes?
Yeah,
So,
because then too you can reduce the amount of weight on your stabilizers because you already have a pretty good feeling bow. You're just kind of just enhancing and tweaking it slightly to make it even more forgiving. And and then you'll feel that with the product. It's just how everything feels and it's all put together at the end.
yeah. And it's funny too, like having this bow, I'm not going to have a side mount quiver on it. I'm just going to go for a hip belt quiver because it's just a 3D and target bow. Where my
Yeah.
other one, it's
Oh,
like
that's so much different.
it is different because I'm looking at it. I'm like, man, when I put this back bar
Yeah.
on, it's not going on the inside. It's going on the outside because my bow always leans to the inside now because I don't have the quiver and the arrow
Yeah.
weight on the
Yeah.
right hand side because I'm a right hand shooter. And I was like, that's going to be different, but that's where it's got to go because that's the
Yeah.
whole point of it is to help level it out. So yeah, which I never even thought of before. It was just
Mm-hmm.
is what it is. The bubble doesn't lie.
That's right. This is a
So
perfect segue.
oh man.
It is so interesting just how archery and target shooting and 3D there's so many similarities between the rifle side and I think that's what's captivating and what draws people in. It's just a different thing to get
Oh,
obsessed with, right? Like the long range rifle, it's the same. It's when you break it down to its different components. Ultimately, everybody fascinates on gear, but then it gets to the form. And once you get past the gear, you have all the best and the best that you can afford. Really, what makes a difference is how you implement that in the field, how you train, use that equipment for whatever you're wanting to use it for, whether that's strictly hunting or getting into the weeds and doing target or 3D or indoor or Vegas shoots. There's no limit, right?
and write it down. I'm new to
Exactly.
this. I am new to this. I'll be the
Yeah.
first one to
Yeah.
admit.
No
I
shit.
used to try to remember everything, and I'm
Oh,
getting a
man.
little older, and I don't remember stuff. And even if I did, man, I can look back. I
Yeah.
was today. I went back to my arrows that had a 1/4 inch knock, right tear. You think I would have? That was from a week and a half ago or a week ago.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not going to remember which arrow, so I
Yeah.
wrote them all down. And today I was able to get 2 or 3 more through paper while my dog was outside, but it was writing it down. Like, okay, let's see if we can improve this. But that would be no different than your cold bore shooting and writing everything
Yeah.
down and
Yeah.
any adjustments that you make. I mean, it sounds anal, but honestly, it's just it it's being responsible, honestly, because it's like I made this change, we'll write it down. If it makes an improvement, great. If it
Yeah.
doesn't, well, you can forget about it. You don't have to worry about it again.
Hmm.
But you're sure going to want to know how it improved or if it made it worse
Yeah,
because now
especially
you're
when you're,
understanding it.
yeah, especially, yeah, you're understanding it from a bird's eye view instead of just being caught up in that moment of that day, that shoot, whether you shot good or not. Understanding tracking precision, which is how your equipment is interfacing with your body mechanics, versus am I hitting what I'm actually fucking aiming for? And it gets worse with age and you're just like me. We're hobby
Oh,
whores, right?
yeah,
You take on another thing and another thing, another thing. You go, the wife, the kids, hunting season's coming up. You got a million things. Start writing stuff down so you can track your progress, whether you're getting worse or better, and then fully understanding when do I need to change out my string, or am I truly putting all my effort into my form, or am I getting a little bit
absolutely.
sore? How I shot, and you'll see if you put all your effort in those groups will get smaller and that level of precision and accuracy will get better and better as time goes on.
It's also important too, like, again, I don't think it matters whether you're doing rifle or bow, but let's say I've got some rifle questions, but I don't shoot my rifle quite as much as I'd like to, just because of time in life.
Hmm.
But I write down the
Yep.
changes that I made. I did some stuff for the positive, negative. I'm going to call you up one day, a couple weeks from now or whatever, and be like, okay, I'm working on this here. A couple weeks ago, I did XYZ
Hmm.
and I got this. What do you think? Like, and maybe
Yeah.
we've been having this discussion for a while and you're trying to help me get my groups, get my form, whatever it is. At least I've got it written down what I did. So when I explain it, I don't forget a step in there and it confused,
Yeah.
and you're not giving
Yep.
me wrong advice for, a little bit of coaching and stuff because you have a lot more knowledge in it and vice versa. You know what I mean? It's like
Hmm.
if it's down on paper, you know exactly what you did. it might jog your memory, or at least it'll keep you from relaying the wrong steps that you did,
Yeah.
or the wrong message, which could totally screw up your advice to me or anybody
Yeah.
else. So yeah, I'd have to say that's my biggest change this year. Documentation of everything. And it's
Yeah,
so
it makes
simple.
a big difference. It really does. I've done it, especially with like reloading, and man, you step away from the reloading bench for a day or two, it's alien. You're like, what step was I on? This is not good. So, yeah, that's definitely something that if you're really trying to become very like to the extreme proficient, start writing stuff down. You'll see your progress, and you'll feel better about how long it's taking because you'll see that eventual progress. Okay, well, we've been doing this series, so this is kind of the third segment in it. We did kind of the basics, talking about rifle cartridge choices. We talked with Ashley from High BC, his take on his last season and using chassis and his ultimate mountain rifle setup. And I think, just the natural evolution of this is, we talked about recoil, weight, and accuracy and how that kind of triangle and performance and accuracy and features with weight, they all, as your recoil goes up, your weight is coming down, your weight goes up, your recoil goes down, your accuracy goes up. There's all these weight penalties and they're all kind of interconnected. And how to rank three of the highest importance from, highest to lowest. Are you a lightweight mobile hunter? Do you have to make hands-free shots so you're not we're free-handing shots. We're not shooting off bipods primarily because there's long grass or things in the way, that type of stuff. Are we taking longer distance hikes and elevation gains, right? So that's all geared towards lightweight setups. And then are we going for sheer raw performance? That's accuracy, high performance, higher weight. You're shooting in prone more than likely, or shooting off a bipod, so you're going to want some level of connection. So Arca Swiss or Picatinny rails, the whole gamut of that. And then it's easier to mitigate recoil. It's easier to spot shots. You're usually running higher magnification optics. Almost all aspects of this build style results in a weight penalty. We broke that, I feel like, fairly thoroughly, and then as well as cartridge selection, terminal performance, recoil, barrel life. We're really going to get into that later with like reloading and talking about the differences in cartridges and how to really get the most out of each cartridge, right? But just adding with the cartridge talks, we did talk about it a little bit in the first part of the series, in the first episode. I really want to stress the importance of really understanding the numbers and how that can play a pretty critical role in understanding hit percentages. Say you have a simulation at a point 0.5 MOA extreme spread with a good wind call, and your ability means that you're able to call the wind within 1.25 mile per hour. That's 68% of the time you're calling it within 2.5 mile per hour. That's a very good wind caller, right? And the differences between some of these cartridges can be actually profound, right? So if we're
Is that the shape of it we're talking, or is there just a lot of differences in the bullets themselves?
so it'd be more just like cartridge design. So like 308 versus 6.5 Creedmoor or 6 millimeter or 26 Nosler, just for some examples of like when we're talking about selecting different cartridges and why that the industry has been pushing more towards higher speed cartridges, more 7 mm's, 6.5 Creedmoors, but really hot rodding it versus the stereotypical like 30-06, 308. Just just to talk about raw performance and its advantages. In an optimized setup, the objective is to get hit percentages, right? And what that actually means though is like, for instance, if I can't nail down the wind within a 5 mile an hour call, what does that hit percentage look like? someone that's able to get within 2.5 mile per hour wind call 95% of the time with a 308 shooting a 175 Sierra Match King at 2,600 feet per second on a 10-inch target, that's only 56%
Oh,
hit
wow.
probability at 700 yards versus a 6.5 Creedmoor with 140 grain hybrid at 2,850 feet per second. That's a 80% hit percentage.
That's crazy.
That is crazy, hey? Like
So
it's such a like I mean like obviously we don't want to continually be going towards constant like high performance, high recoil, but it definitely is a factor in why we've been seeing the industry shift to these more tailored cartridge towards performance in the wind because then that's it's not that it's not a factor, but it might mean that you have to be half as good at calling the wind than a traditional cartridge if you want to push the distance to 600 or 700 yards. To where that 308, that 30-06, may not be the best cartridge for what you're trying to accomplish, right?
basically, you're finding a more forgiving
Setup. Yeah.
yeah, full setup in itself.
Cartridge. It's
There.
just a
Yeah.
cartridge on its own. It's just more forgiving and it just is going to make you better. It's going to make you better at getting hits on target because once you dial and get the trajectory dialed in and mapped, that's math. That doesn't really change. There's some factors with headwinds and, crosswind effects and different factors like that, elevation. Okay. But that's the most static situation. It's gravity, right? And ballistics and extreme spreads do play a role into that. But wind is a continually changing. Uh, it's just everything about it is like understanding it. It's harder to get good at calling wind. It's hard to understand wind calls. Sometimes you can overcall the wind, undercall the wind. Lots of guys will just hold like left edge if there's a left wind, or right edge, left wind, etc. Holding into the
Yeah.
wind, but just on the edge of plate or edge of kill zone in quotations.
Is there any basic advice you could give for a person getting into it, trying to learn wind calling, just to maximize your experience? I guess is the best way. Beginner,
Uh,
medium, or
just shooting, right? Like, I mean,
okay.
there's not like beyond a wind meter, like getting a kestrel, understanding what that feels like at your shooting position and what you're observing downrange on
That
target.
that be like
Um,
Mirage, or is
yeah,
that
mirage. It would be a combination of things, right? Layers of calling winds. That'll be mirage, wind meter. Lots of guys say that wind meters, oh, that's rubbish information. That doesn't matter. It's what's out there. That is true, but the Kestrel is the most accurate information that you have available because it's a wind meter,
yeah,
right? Like there's nothing going to be like, I know what the wind is here, but you're going to have to use combinations and that may take a long time to get good at and understand and a lot of trigger time. So that's why these cartridges are worth looking at and just running the numbers, especially if you're planning on buying a new rifle. Maybe you're planning on rechambering or getting a new barrel spun up for an existing action, or a full custom build. Listen to your gunsmiths. Ask them what's. But don't get sucked into just the trends. Understand the numbers. Why we're doing these things, right? It can help guide your needs. Like we're talking about, recoil and energy downrange and mass for the prey that you're hunting, right? Like if you're gearing towards elk and moose, probably want to stick at 7 mm and higher, but understanding why, right? And what
yeah,
advantages you're exploiting with that cartridge. And then, we kind of talked about that, but I think really what I want to dig into a little bit is, what's the differences between a factory setup, a semi-custom, and a full custom, and then we'll get into a little bit of light into optics, some different examples of setups that I personally would recommend, or things to consider, maybe things to think about, but just the differences between them all, right? So
yeah.
In some of the factory setups, rifles are pretty good. Historically, like we know how to make a rifle shoot. A lot of those older rifles, they shoot pretty decent. They can hold maybe not a half minute or quarter minute. They may have some issues with stringing, but really what you need to focus on with those setups is just getting a good optic, getting something, depending on what your budget is, we're going to talk about that. Getting something that tracks though. Like if you're going to dial with a turret, make sure it tracks. If you're going to do holdovers, get a front focal plane or understand halving your holdovers when you're at half zoom. So like if you're running 22 power, you'd half zoom on 11. That means your holdovers are double, right? Because the distance is double on a second focal plane when you power down because everything, all the subtensions are based off of the max zoom ratio.
That makes sense. I've never really thought about that, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Right. And that's
Yeah.
something that you need to consider. If you really want to make sure that you're getting the right optic for your type of hunting, look at that front focal plane and that second focal plane. What's the drawbacks? What's the positives and negatives of the two? Because they definitely, I know everything's been geared towards front focal plane lately, but there definitely are some good positives with second focal plane, like small, very crisp holding points on your crosshairs. I haven't had any issues in the hunting realm or target, but if you're going to do like PRS or moving targets or anything like that, front focal plane is probably your best bet because then you can power down and dynamically move up your zoom ratio according to the
Yeah.
distances you're shooting to maximize that, especially when you're in like a time trial style competition.
That makes sense. Yeah. I run a second focal plane on all my rifles, and most of it is because I'm either like right up in their business because of
Yeah.
the thick stuff that we hunt, or there's a big opening and I've got the time to max zoom. I'm not making a quick shot or anything because it's close. I've I don't know that I've ever all the animals I've taken
Hmm.
with my rifle. I honestly don't know that I've been on anything in between
Yeah.
in my zooms. I've been lucky that way. It's either right in
Yeah,
front of
me
me
too.
and it's put
Yeah.
the crosshairs on it, pull the trigger,
Yeah.
because it's like staring at you,
Yeah.
20 yards away, or it's 200 yards out or 300 yards out, and you got time because it has no idea you're there.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about thinking about these situations before you're in them,
Yeah,
right? So, I'm walking, I'm always running my zoom power down and I know what my
always.
holdover is, right? Like I
Yeah,
I know what my max effective range is in that configuration for my scope zoom. I
yeah,
know what I can and cannot do and the distances I should be shooting and the way I'm shooting, like snap shooting, right?
yeah,
Think about that stuff, right? Versus when you have a complete ambush situation, and that's typically with elk, right? You're
yeah,
going to be counting points, making sure they're legal, slowing things down, so that maybe you gear up your setup for that. But if you're going to be deer hunting and you jump bucks all the time in heavy timber, then again, gear your optic and your setup for that.
yeah.
But
And
yeah,
I don't mean to state the obvious here either, but I'm going to because I know way too many people that this has happened to. When you go out, I don't care if you are taking a shot on something, you go out and do target shooting at the range. Always, always, always
back
put
off your turret.
back off your turret. Get that zoom all
Yeah.
the way back
Yeah.
to whatever your lowest setting is,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
I know so many people that they like, I'll get it when I get back to the truck, or I'll get it when I get home. And they
No.
forget life gets
Yeah.
lifey, and then they go out hunting the next day,
Yeah.
and they have an opportunity that's a fast one, and they put it up, and they can't find the animal because it's
Yeah.
zoomed out to max, and it's only 50 yards away. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And then it
reset
just,
everything back to
yeah.
zero. Take the time. I don't care what it is. Just do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it just compromises your confidence in your
Yeah.
setup too, because that just sours. You may have built a brand new custom rifle, and you're not in that obsessive mentality of backing off your turrets, back off your zoom. Every single time, back off your zoom, back off your turret, and adjust your parallax to 100 yards minimum.
And, we say it's a rookie mistake, but it happens to everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody will have it happen. You may
Yeah.
not lose an animal chance over it, but you may go back out the next day and
Yeah.
you're looking at something and
Exactly.
you're like, oh shit, I did forget to turn it down. And then it's like, I'm sorry, but 99.9, I won't say everybody, but I'll say 99.9% of us have run into it at one point,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's cost us something or not. And it's like, you
Yeah.
will call it a rookie mistake when you do it to yourself because you'll be like, why didn't I do it this one
Mm-hmm.
time? So,
Exactly. So talking about factory semi-custom. So factories, obviously, we all have those rifles kicking around. You can really intensify its capabilities with a decent optic. There's different levels of optics, I would say. Some examples would be, we got our, well, I would say initially you want to make the distinction. Second, our front focal plane.
yeah.
How much zoom are we going to get into? We talked about on the last one, on the first series, about talking about once we get past 20 x zoom, you really need some good glass to back that type of performance up. Otherwise, you're going to have aberrations. It's going to be blurry. You're going to see a lot of weird things. It's going to be hard to get in the scope. So unless you're going to get into like the Night Force attackers, the Revic Acuras, Leopold Mark Fives, Mark Fours, Vortex Razor Gen 3s, Gen 2s, Gen 1s, or the zero comp, like the ZC 420, maybe a Callus. Those are all tier one March optics. They're all tier one optics. They're all going to potentially have a weight penalty because they're heavy as shit because you got a lot of glass backing up that performance, but you're not going to see any blurriness. So if you're going to go above 20, you want to go to a 25 power, you're going to shoot more accurately. You're going to be able to see farther and better. Those bigger tubes too, you can say like a 34 millimeter tube, 35 millimeter tube, inner tube is going to really allow you to have a greater field of view and more light collection in those low light situations. So, keep that in mind, but you're paying top dollar. But the thing is those optics, they hold their value and they tend to last a lifetime. That's my experience with that type of stuff. You can count on some of these optics to potentially, your rifle falls on the ground and hits rocks, they're going to hold zero. And then on the opposite side of things, like we talked about, because it's a factory setup, here's some budget-minded optics that I would recommend would be like your Leopold VX-3 CDS turret with like a custom turret for your ballistics or a Vortex PST. Some of the PSTs are really good. You just have to make sure you confirm that tracking. So there's some tests that we can do. I might put up a video on the website just how to do these tests, but it's just confirming that the internals of your scope and the adjustments that you are doing are tracking perfectly with your perceived elevation, right? If it's 20 m away, I want it to be exactly 20 m away, or at least 99.9% of that predictable measurement. Because like I said, that's just introducing another element of error. And you can calibrate for that, but you can't calibrate for it unless you test it. And they would be through your ballistic software where you're doing that calibration. And then one of the other ones that are really good is Huskama Blue Diamonds, the 20 powers with the laser etched turrets. Those are really good optics too. Like I know they've kind of been pushed out of the limelight with Best of the West and actually like Gunworks and Aaron and them Davis, they own that company originally. But they're really good. Like if you set up the information, you put garbage in, you get garbage out, right? With any of those range, dial, shoot style yardage turrets that are laser etched, if you put garbage information, you're going to get garbage out of it, garbage performance. But if you put the time into it, you map out the trajectory, they can be very accurate and very fast. So that's the benefit of that. So if you put one of those optics on any factory setup, you're going to have pretty good luck. The thing that's really going to determine whether or not that factory rifle performs is your ability to reload. And that's the drawback of having a factory rifle trying to adapt it for long range rifle is there could be built up stress in the barrel. Maybe your reloads are kind of finicky. Maybe the crown has some damage or something going on with it. And then its point of impact is shifting continually. And it just takes a lot of work, right? To make sure that you get that system dialed in. And that's really where that semi-custom, so like the Fierce rifles, they're what I would call like a semi-custom rifle, or possibly like a Chris Arms Mesa, something like that. You're getting a lot of the benefits of a full custom setup that could be tailored to what you want. You're getting a carbon fiber stock. You're getting a carbon barrel in some circumstances. You're getting a, a pretty tight toleranced action where it's pretty square and pretty concentric. And you're getting in a package at a significantly less cost of like a full custom. I think like the Gunworks rifles are like 13,000. I think like a full custom's like 7. Some of the semi-custom actions are like, or well, setups. They're running in that 3 to 4 range, maybe 2.5. So it's they're pretty expensive,
Yeah.
but it's just lessening the amount of work that you have to get the gun shooting and tuned, right? That's what it's all about. So they're gonna have better barrels. The actions are gonna be just nicer, right? The fit and finish is gonna be nicer overall. The ergonomics of the stock is gonna be better. Um, and when we talk about semi-customs and we talk about factories, well, a lot of guys will say, well, why don't I just throw a new stock on my factory setup? Yes, that can dramatically change the feel of the rifle and how it performs, especially if you have barrel tags or you're using a crappy plastic stock that's flexing when you're trying to shoot off a bipod. It can make a big difference, right? But there's still a lot of work that goes into those stocks. Like if you pick up a new stock, like a Macmillan carbon fiber stock, you still have to have it inletted. I know they say you don't, but realistically you do. Just because it's just not quite gonna fit perfect the way you want. You're gonna want pillars. You're gonna want bedding. You're gonna want the action to be inletted and the tang to be perfectly blended in to have good contact. So there's not no because that's what the bedding is doing, right? Is it's allowing the whole action to perfectly interface with the stock surface in a way that has maximum surface area with minimal torque. So it's all about keeping the whole thing solid so it doesn't change without introducing torque in either direction from the front pillar and action screw to the rear on the action screw and tang. So that's how that works. So in a semi-custom, so like you're getting all of that custom feel and custom accessories and performance and a lot of the same things you get in a custom, in a semi-custom, for a fraction of the price. So it can actually be a really good option for people that want a nice rifle that's going to perform really well. They do have their issues, I will say, in some circumstances. But factory, if you get a stock, you're still going to have to put quite a bit of money into it. So that might be something to think about if you're going to jump ship into a completely new build and just from the get-go go with a custom, or if you're going to restock your factory. So like MDT chassis, that's a great option because it's plug and play. You put that old factory action right in, and with no inletting, it's going to work, right? Versus carbon fiber stocks, you need inletting, you need bedding potentially. So you could think it's going to cost you 800, but then after everything's said and done, it could cost you 1,500, right? So versus you might have been able to just buy a whole new rifle for 2,500 for a semi-custom, right? So that's a consideration. And then semi-custom rifles, they do a pretty good job of everything. You might not have it tailored exactly to the way that you want, like the color, the fit and finish. Maybe the stock won't be exactly how you like. Maybe you might not have like an Arca Swiss rail on it for balancing and shooting off of a tripod. Maybe you don't have quick detach. Maybe it's just swivel studs for your bipod. So those little differences in just like the usability of it can be a big deal for some people, and that's why they go towards the full custom because you're getting guarantees of accuracy, precision, and to be honest, you're getting the people who built it, right? They're going to stand behind that product. They're going to guarantee a certain level of accuracy regardless. So if you're not getting the accuracy out of your rifle, they're going to help you get there to that finish line. They're going to make sure that you are a satisfied customer. You're able to get the accuracy that you want, factory or hand loads. And if there is accuracy issues, they're going to tear apart the gun and make sure that they're taking care of their customers. That's what good gunsmiths do.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. And it's just the boozy shit, right? Like there's that first kind of cool was just like it works. And that second kind of cool is just I like it, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a full custom, it's badass. I love it. It's my one rifle. I'm gonna hunt in Africa with it, or I'm gonna shoot my best elk, or I'm gonna hand it down. Like those heirloom level rifles.
They're not
They're gonna
going anywhere anytime
no,
soon.
no, exactly. And the benefit of that is too, like you get a astronomically accurate rifle. Usually
Yeah.
you can get to like the quarter half MOA, no problem. And things just work. Just they tune easier, they reload easier. And usually when you get a custom build with a gun builder, especially here in Canada, they take care of you. They hook you up with, you get first dibs on powder sometimes or bullets or, they want you to have a good experience. They want to make sure that you're using their rifles and you're coming back as a recurring customer. So they're really going to take care of you. So that's what you get with a full custom. It's just maximum performance tailored to your every need. But you definitely can get pretty close to that level of performance with a semi-custom, and then factory, you just got to put more work into it. You got to reload. That's all it comes down to,
Yeah.
right? Talking about some accessories, I think every gun that's going to be shooting long range should have is an anti-cant level. That's really important. Like we use it with bows, right? It's anytime you're dialing, you need that bubble level to make sure that you're dialing perfectly up and down so that you're not canting it to the right or to the left.
How
If you do
quick
that, it could be a miss.
how quickly will it change by a few inches? Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
if you're out just a little bit in your bubble there, like how significant are we talking?
Well,
Like three,
all of
four,
these,
500 yards even?
yeah. So all of these things with precision and shooting long range is death by a thousand cuts.
Yeah.
It's not ever one thing. It's you negated this thing and that thing, and you didn't, maybe you had some sort of environmental, because we want to only be dealing with environmental issues, right?
Yeah.
Like if you have an environmental problem where you can't figure out the wind, or maybe there's an updraft, or maybe your elevation is off for like how high you are for your air density, maybe you're a little bit off on your yardage. Those are the things that you only want to be messing with. As soon as you have your rifle's not level, you got problems with your fundamentals and marksmanship, you don't have a good tuned rifle, it's not shooting small groups with small max spreads, you're just introducing this cascading effect where it's little by little by little bit that makes you make a miss, right? In certain circumstances, and it'll be hard for you to track your performance because of that. So what that means is it's a little bit to, so say if you're canted off to the left, well, yeah, you'll impact left, probably a couple of inches. It just depends on whether or not you're off on your wind call. Maybe you weren't fully, in your natural point of aim properly when you're setting up your position of fire. Like all these other things that will come into play, and it's just best just to have an anti-cant. Make sure that it's plumbed with your reticle. There's a lot of different ways of doing that. I would just, get your reticle, get it perfectly level to your action and to your anti-cant bubble, have those leveled to each other, and then get a string on a weight and just hang it, and then get that reticle perfectly squared up with that, and then that's where you zero your bubble level off of, right? Because then you know. And you can do tests again at the range when we're testing our scope for tracking. That's what you're testing too. You get your target nice and level, and then you make sure your gun's level. And if it isn't, you're going to see that when you dial up to 20 MOA, it's going to cant off. And then that is an indication that your bubble level isn't level to the reticle. We're just getting rid of all these uncontrollable things, right? And ideally, you would have that anti-cant on the left-hand side of your rifle if you're a right-hand shooter, and vice versa if you're a lefty.
Just easier to see.
Yeah, so you can co-witness. So you are aiming with your right eye, and then you just open your left eye, look down your bubble level. Okay, good to go. And then you can focus on executing a good shot.
It's no different than anything else. If you take all the mechanical issues out, you're just forced. Well, Mother Nature is always there,
Absolutely.
and yourself. It's
Yeah.
nice to forget about the mechanical parts and
Yeah.
knowing that those are all set, And again, I don't care what weapon you're using, gun, bow, whatever.
Yeah.
Take care of the mechanics, and then you can focus on the important stuff with that. Not that that's
Absolutely.
not important, but if you know it's good, it's good. Now you can worry about Mother Nature, and you can worry about yourself and your process.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
there's enough to
Absolutely.
think. There's enough to think about as it is.
And it's hard to think of and process the information as it's flowing, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of the thing that separates the amateurs from the masters is they're able to set up on their shots quickly and evaluate the situation. They've done all the work already on making sure that all the things that they can control are already in control. Their rifle, their ammunition, their scope, they know everything's 100% so that they have the confidence when they're evaluating the wind call. Maybe they're observing the animal. They're thinking about the shot, how they're going to position their body. What are they going to use, a bipod or a tripod? That's what they're thinking about. The actual things that matter in the shot, not is my ballistics good? What's going on with my scope? Is my scope holding zero? Holy shit. You can't take that shot
Yeah.
unless this is what we're talking about. We're not talking about 800-900 yard shots necessarily, but we're talking about shots we're confident in making, like 100% chance. Otherwise, for me as a hunter and an ethical hunter, I'm not interested in that maybe shit. I'm not interested in Hail Marys. I want to know that if it's a bull or buck or ram of a lifetime, that first shot I'm hitting my mark or I'm doing the best I fucking can to make sure
In
that
your
bullet's
mind,
hitting.
you're
Yeah,
110%.
yeah,
Everything is good.
yeah,
If something
exactly.
happens after that, I guess you better figure out what happened. But
Yeah,
you should be pulling the trigger not on a, I hope I can. Oh, this is going to be cool if I hit
yeah,
it. None of that. I'm killing it. It's
yeah,
dropping where it is, and then go from there.
exactly. Because it's just like archery. You can always get closer,
Yeah.
like there to a degree, right? But
Dude.
that's what we're
Yeah.
trying to do, and that's the whole point of this whole long range discussion and long range hunting and shooting and how that kind of fits in is you're just increasing your opportunities, right?
Yeah.
Because that's
No,
not
it
always
makes
possible.
total
And
sense.
then the next thing I have is just talking about gear management equipment recommendations. I got two setups. I just kind of wrote them down. I'll go through kind of the descriptions of them and just what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses. Like we were talking about with that first podcast, and then a little bit with Ashley as well with like chassis and stuff is just you know that ultimate setup it doesn't really exist. There's going to be different like weight, high, heavy hitting rifles, full customs. They can do things better than a super lightweight setup can do, but a super lightweight setup is lightweight and allows you to be more mobile. So here, just the differences between two stereotypical setups that I see. Well, the first one, it's 7 pounds. It's a semi-custom Remington 700 long action, 300 Win with a carbon fiber barrel. The barrel's been changed out, has a new stock. Pretty much the whole thing is semi-custom, tailored around kind of that in-between range of a factory and a semi-custom. It's those Frankenstein guns, you see, like
Yeah.
stuff that's been pieced together over years and slowly modified into something that resembles a semi or full custom. Usually blueprinted action, carbon fiber barrel on this one. So it's lightweight, geared around being lightweight, 7 pounds. Shooting a 185 burger, uh, classic hunter bullet, so it's not as finicky. It doesn't have a Seeking ogive. It has a more traditional hybrid style ogive, so it's just easier to tune. And this one had a Huskama Blue Diamond with a 20 power, so you could substitute that for like a PST, maybe one of the lightweight razors, or say like a VX3 with a adjustable turret, something in that range, like that semi-custom, like more affordable, still really good stuff, but not like a tier one massive scopes and Schmidt and Bender PM2 stuff, but just like really good stereotypical high-end hunting scopes tailored towards hunting only, and using that in conjunction with a SIG BDX 3000. So
Yeah.
that BDX 3000, it gives you pretty good capability out to 800 yards, And when used, you could use like a BDX 3000 or like a Vortex Fury. That's going to go pretty hand in hand with this type of setup. Its strengths are it's very optimized towards speed. Its strengths are speed. It's lightweight. Shots 0 to 600 very fast. Minimal setup. Very easy to get on target. It's dial and shoot style. There's a little bit of work and leg work for like setting up the turrets. So you'd have to, confirm your 600 yard elevation for your shot equations, confirm that information on a couple different days and a couple different scenarios. You want to make sure that you're checking that data at 600 yards, how much elevation you have to put on your scope, and your shoot to on 1200 as well. I'd recommend really pushing the distance. Reason why I do it on a couple different days, just so you're getting that aggregate, that average, so it's not some other weird element
That makes
of
sense.
environmental impact that's maybe you're hitting high or low, and you'll figure it out over course like 1 or 2 times out shooting. But the reason why you want to hit those ranges is because at 600 yards, if you dial it in, it'll be pretty good across the whole range. So, like, say if you zero at 100 yards, you get your data for your dope for your shoot to range for 600 yards for your scope elevation for your adjustment, and you have that in. You know what that is. Okay, say it's like 11 and a half MOA. Okay, and then you go in, you try that again. Okay, it's 11 and a half MOA. Okay, now it's 12. You'll get a good idea of what's going on. That is not entirely, but almost entirely just straight ballistics, just your shot equation and ballistics.
Yeah.
You're not going to be dealing with as much problems with air density, as well as like Coriolis effect, spin drift, not as much. When you get to 1200, that's what it's checking. And when you do your trajectory validation, you have your 1200 yard hits and you do the same at 1200 and you have your 600. It's almost like you're gaming it. You're kind of blending the two. You're getting it kind of good enough. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then it just allows you to shoot to 1200, but then you're going to have to keep track of some things for shoot to ranges as far as like backing off if you go 1500 in elevation. Like we've said on other podcasts, you go higher up, less air density. So then you reduce a click. Or
Yeah.
you did all your sighting and your trajectory validation at 10 degrees. Well, now we're at minus 20. Well, 10 to 15 degrees, you probably want to increase a click because it's slower reactivity of the powder and it's cooler temperatures. So you're accommodating for that, right? You're gaming it, right?
Yeah.
That'll be less if the cartridge you've chosen is high performance because it's so high performance that ballistic, again, that coefficient and speed bails you out. So you're more likely to hit because you're flatter shooting in general. But yeah, it's usually a 0 to 600 yard type setup. It's really optimized for that. Most of the hunting situations that you encounter are in that range. It's very effective at speed. Its weaknesses are, though, max effective range. Past 600, it starts getting very difficult. You really got to know all these little like tricks, like reduce a click, add a click, whatnot. It's vulnerability to gross environmental changes. So big changes. So say if you sight it in to 10 degrees and you want to shoot in 35 degrees Celsius, you may not hit every time, right?
You know what? We're all the prairie provinces. I don't care if you're Canada, US, you guys all go through these huge, like way bigger temperature swings
Yep.
than like, let's say what I go through. We're not that far apart, but the mountain ranges make a huge difference. So
Yep.
I don't have those swings, but I know you can go up and down 30, 40 degrees in
Yep.
24 to 48 hours. So
Yep. So you
yeah,
want to make
that's
sure that you have your system with that type of forgiveness built in. And really, you only get that out of a full custom. You can build that in a little bit with your semi-customs because they're pretty much a custom at that point.
yeah.
But just because it's lighter weight, it's just not as repeatable and dependable for raw performance as a heavier setup. That's just because it's lighter, right? There's give and take. And then the second setup is, so just back to that first setup, ballistics on shoot two ranges, the ballistics cannot be altered. That's also kind of a vulnerability of the setup because once you shoot to the custom turret and the turret's mounted, all your reloads have to be the same. You're going to want to use the same type of factory rifle ammunition, like factory ammunition. So you really have to have enough because if you don't, that turret is no good to you. So that's kind of a vulnerability of that. So you got to make sure that you have enough components to run that setup. So that can be kind of tricky, be kind of expensive. But once you have it set up, all it does is shoot. It's going to work beautifully for you for most of the situations. And the second setup is 11 pounds. This would be like, maybe you have a Defiance long action in like a 300 PRC or a 7 PRC, full bougie, proof research barrel. It's carbon fiber wrap barrel. We're shooting 210 VLDs, 215s, maybe 208s or 220s. Big horsepower, hey? Big recoil, but it's heavier setup. Running like a Night Force NXS or an Attacker. Maybe a Gen 3 Razor or a Mark 5 Leopold. Maybe using like a Vectronics PLR F15 or like a SIG 10K. Something in that nature, maybe one of the high power Fury integrated binoculars from Vortex, something that has some serious laser power, right? With a Kestrel and maybe a Garmin as that interface to get your data, like a watch or something like that. Strengths are very precise firing solutions, and your max effective range can be at or beyond 2,000 yards. So very reliable data. It's very good at getting you very precise, accurate adjustments. Data collection is going to be top notch. You're going to have multiple sensors. It's going to be reliable. It's going to be accurate. Purpose of this is to emphasize kind of the importance of simple versus complicated, right? Like the simple, you're going to get speed. You're pretty much going to get everything you need in a hunting situation. If you want to target shoot, though, and shoot really far distances to test yourself, you can do it with both setups, but it's really going to be favored towards the full tier one optic setup with like a full custom. But it is going to, again, like we talked about, it's going to have a weight penalty. It's going to be probably about 10 to 11 pounds. You can go a little bit lighter, but you're compromising a little bit if you're getting into the magnums. The biggest thing with that is just making sure that people don't get sucked into the tactical or target world too deeply, because it's really easy when we're setting up our rifles to be setting up our rifle towards more like a tactical style target shooting setup, and that could be really counterproductive to our hunting specifications and criteria.
I think you got to be honest as to what you want to do.
Yeah, build it to what you're going to use in the field, and make sure that intensifies your hunt style, not just shooting at the range. The old range queen shit. Like, it's really sexy, but how does it carry? Carries like a ton of bricks. It's brutal, right? Like my detachable box mag is falling out all the time. I lost my magazine. I got a big Arca Swiss rail digging into my back when I'm trying to carry the damn thing. Being realistic.
Yeah.
Make sure that you are well understanding your style of hunting, because you want this to intensify it, not hinder you. So if you're lugging around the kitchen sink and you have all these sensors, and this is kind of the differentiating thing between the two, that heavier setup with all the sensors, it takes longer to set up to shoot. So understanding that. So that means you really got to be dialed in with your training and like your shot practices, like position practicing, right? Yeah. Positional shooting, kind of doing drills on yourself. Like, hey, I can set up, I can bang steel at 700. How long did it take for me to set up? How long did it take for me to judge the wind and get all these sensors on board and make the shot? And
Getting fluid with
oftentimes,
that stuff.
yeah, exactly. And
Fluid and
odds are
fast.
you'll find that you kind of favor towards the lighter weight setup.
Yeah.
But if you are interested in shooting really far distances, it might be better to go towards the more heavy setup. And
And I
then
think
just,
time too. I think the other thing people
yeah,
have to realize is be honest. Everybody can dream. Everybody, like we all have these
yeah,
aspirations to do certain things, but I think
hmm
be honest with what kind of time you have and are you willing to sacrifice other things to create more time if you really want to get to that next level, because that's what it all comes down to. It doesn't matter
hmm
what
yeah,
profession you're in or what hobby you're in. When you want to, if you really want to push this with these rifles for the target and stuff like that, you're going to be putting in time. You're not just going to do this once in a blue moon and think you're going to reach that level, because chances are you won't. It's a
nope.
lot of sacrifice to get to that point, a lot of time.
Yeah, we just kind of casually, you know, grazed over that quick, but yeah, it's a huge time commitment, right? So that's really what you're like when you invest in a custom, it's just reducing that time. It's just like all these things, like all these to a degree, right? We don't want to get gadget centric, like gadget crazy, but these are very mechanically accurate devices, right? Like your turret adjustment assembly, like that is a very precise piece of machinery. Like there is just no way to game that. There's like you can't other than getting that level of quality. There's just no if, ands, or buts. Like you just if you want that level of precision to shoot really far and to have something that's really, really repeatable, like 100% on tracking, unfortunately, there's a certain level of price tag,
Yeah.
and that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
But
And it
other
and
than
it does
that,
come down to the person behind it. Like, yeah, that stuff. If you don't put in the time to utilize the
yeah,
benefits of what you purchased, what you've invested in, it's not going to do you much good. So yeah,
yeah,
take advantage of that beautiful machine.
yeah, exactly. And just going down kind of just the next obvious thing is like we talked about, and we'll do a separate segment specifically for reloading, but just kind of an overview. When we put everything together, don't like I see this a little bit with like some of the very exotic builds for geared around performance. I just would be careful because I remember the 7mm 300s that people were building there for a while, kind of a Wildcat cartridge. But it's all centered around shooting a 195. And what I found personally was if it's centered around some one projectile, one specific bullet, that can be tricky because then you're fully committed into a cartridge that's really maximized to shoot only one bullet. Don't build your whole setup around just it banking on being able to shoot one bullet really well. Give yourself a little bit of leeway because we've seen that with the normal builds where guys are going really heavy and it kind of negated their ability to shoot the lighter weight just because they chose barrels with twist rates that weren't adequate for those smaller projectiles. They just didn't jive together. So then they're forced to shoot the really heavy shit, hey, instead of lighter stuff where maybe they weren't pushing the brass as hard. So just give yourself some built-in versatility in what you can use for projectiles. That'll help you a lot. I think just because of the obvious, like those 195 extreme outer limits, lots of guys are building their guns around that stuff, and or like some of the heavy Barnes long range stuff. Just be careful because for whatever reason, if that barrel doesn't shoot that bullet really well, you're kind of fucked. Like,
Yeah,
let's
that
be
would
honest.
suck.
You're totally committed. It could be some semi Wildcat cartridge style, and you're fully committed to it, and you got a twist rate that's for really heavy. It's not necessarily the best. It's better to, like I say, go with like an optimized setup, like 2800 to 29-ish, or whatever the optimized for the setup. Like if it's a 7 PRC, it's going to be a bit higher velocities, but just make sure that you're not specifically tailoring the entire build around one projectile working, because that's a big risk.
Yeah.
And talking about that, reloading 0 to 100 yards is we can kind of break it down into three different types of bullet designs. We have the tangent ogive. That's, it's got strengths. It's smooth transition to lands. It's more just your traditional. It's a boat tail design. It has a more curved nose. Your more traditional sloped nose. That's like your EL DXs, stuff like that. Smooth transition to lands on rifling, and it tends to be pretty self-aligning between itself and the bore. It's less sensitive to seating depth. It has a lower BC sometimes than Seek and Ogive on the same length, but they're pretty good, like just for tuning. So if you don't want to spend a bunch of time reloading for them and tuning them and get pretty close to where you need to be, like, a half MOA gun, if you're perfectly fine with that, that's going to be a good bet. They're going to zero pretty easy. You're going to find groups and node accuracy tones pretty well when you're trying to find your seating depth. And it's an overall good performing bullet design. And then there's the secant ogive. Strengths are typically higher BC than a tangent at the same length. Max precision potential, higher than a tangent. Weaknesses, very sensitive to seating depth. So that means eroding your bore, and in the later end of your lifespan, you do need to retune, maybe sometimes, but it's going to be extremely accurate when you find that accuracy node. But it'll just be kind of a moderate performer, and then you have to adjust the seating depth. And then you'll find that really good spot where it's top-notch performance, quarter MOA guns type of deal. So that the Seek and Ogive is a very pointy transition nose. So that's why it's more sensitive, because it is just a design feature. It just inherently has some sensitivity to seating depth. So what's a weakness? Well, you probably have to be a pretty proficient reloader. So that can kind of be a weird spot to get in. You can sometimes find a load right off the bat that shoots really well for a gun with Seek and Ogive, or it can be one of the most frustrating things you've ever done on the reloading bench, where you're just like, this won't shoot this bullet. And then you fuck around with it for, 20 times the range, and all of a sudden you find that perfect load where it's like, holy crap, this is like unreal performance. But just understand, if you push a gun really hard and you erode that barrel over time, that may change because of that timing, that distance between when it's engaging the lands and its seating depth jump. If that is increasing over time, eventually it's going to get out of that accuracy node, right? So that's a risk. So just something to consider. And then hybrid ogives, the strengths are, it kind of combines the two, strengths of both the secant and tangent ogives into an overall pretty good performing. It's not the best accuracy wise, not the best to tune, but it's kind of like you're getting kind of this weird child of the two mated together. You have aspects of that nose where it's not tangent, but it's not secant. It's kind of pointy. It's kind of pointy. But some of the benefits of this too, though, is on the hybrid ogives, typically, like I know for like the 210 VLDs versus like the 215 hybrids from Berger, they have a built-in bearing surface that's smaller. So the actual surface that's on the actual riding of the bore, the internal bore of your rifle, is smaller. It's a smaller distance. So therefore, it can actually reach higher speeds at a higher weight.
Really?
Yeah, so you can get a couple feet extra performance in speed at the muzzle for a higher weight, which is kind of trippy when you think about it. You're like, no, the 215 should be going slower. Well, no, it's not, because of that riding surface. And you will find that on some of the latest, especially monolithic bullets, with those monolithics, because of the way that they're designed, they don't have a jacket. It's all just one continuous projectile. So some of the bar and stuff is really good for that, where they have built in a smaller bearing surface, so then you get higher speeds for a more ballistically superior bullet per grain weight. So just something to consider when we're selecting for reloading, and we're trying out different ammunition for factory. offerings. Biggest thing though is listen to the gun. It knows what it wants. If you try and you got in your head, I want to shoot this bullet, well, if you're shooting factory, it just might not jive with the barrel and just the whole setup. It just may not work. So if it's not even producing half-minute groups, if we're reloading for it, well, like not even close. We're not even three-quarter, inch groups at 100 yards. Might be a good idea. Change up the bullet design. See what it does. Go to a tangent. If you're trying to shoot sequence and it's not shooting worth a shit and you got 1 inch groups, make a significant change. Go to that tangent ogive style. See what it does. Typically, you're going to see an accuracy boost, right? And then maybe you try the hybrids, right? It's just you have to be flexible to figure out what your gun likes, and then you're really going to have a good idea of what you can do and can't do with that barrel. The barrel usually determines a lot of that.
Yeah.
And just getting into reloading, we'll set that for a different episode, but
That's its own beast right
oh,
there.
it's very it's rabbit hole and rabbit holes, and we're in another dimension, and we're in outer space for a while. There's lots of facets to it. It's pretty wild, but I do have a pretty good way of getting to where we need to be very rapidly, because if you don't have a process with reloading and doing a load workup and determining our max case overall length for max mag length and jump, what is the metric that we start our load testing? Is it 15 thou from the lands contact point? Is it 10 thou? Do we have to work up to our safety loads? What's our optimized range? Because this is where you would make that distinction between, do I use this bullet or this bullet?
Yeah.
Or do I use this cartridge or this cartridge? That's why I said earlier in this episode, you really want to think about what cartridge you're using, because you want to see if you can't hit that optimized, because everybody thinks of it in the most blistering, fast round. Well, what if it doesn't shoot at max accurately? And I got to downgrade it to, like, say its max is running 3,000 feet per second. What if it doesn't tune nice at that? Maybe what if I got to shoot at 2920 or 2,900 feet per second? Is that so detrimental to the performance that maybe I should have just chose this other cartridge, where even if I'm not at max, it's going to be ballistically superior? Just things to consider, right? Because it's not a perfect world. Some of the cases, like, if you're at max load, or you're going to have to do compression, where compression loads where you're pushing powder and crunching powder down, that's probably not going to be a very forgiving setup. So just make sure that you're thinking about that before you get too deep into it, reloading, and then shooting the load workup, 6 per 0.5 grain at a time, continuing packs of 3. Differentiating between our safety pressure, we get to our optimal range of velocity that we want to work within, and we're shooting those groups, and we're versing each other, right? We're versing those groups. We're trying to control whatever we can. You do it in a round robin style. You can do it close groups at 100 and then push the distance. But it's this combination between minimum group size and extreme spread. So shot to shot, is this consistent? Because typically, if your rifle is shooting shot to shot really similarly, it's also going to group really well in a variety of adverse conditions. So we'll get into the specifics of that, like what we do specifically to minimize variation between our cases, our brass uniformity, primer pockets, neck turning, how much neck tension do we want? Do we want to uniform the flash holes? Does it make sense, or does it make an effect to clean our primer pockets every time we reload? At what point do we anneal? All of that we'll all cover in a more comprehensive reloading episode. This is more just kind of the basic considerations when we're setting up a long range rifle, and different considerations from factory, semi custom, and full custom. And then the next thing would be just, confirming zero That's one thing I get asked a lot. That was one person on Facebook has asked me this. What's our zeroing distance? How do we go about that, right? Because so many of these things is all about reducing elements we can't control and controlling everything we can. And one of those things, like we just talked about with your archery, is differentiating shooting groups from hitting where we're aiming. Because those are two things. That's why I really recommend that people make sure that they're tracking all of this. We talked about it, but that's something that like I have a notebook where I know where my cold bore shot is. I shoot it and I actually take calipers and I make sure that I understand where that cold bore is. Cold clean bore and cold foul bore. Because that's really like in a hunting scenario. That's really going to determine that first round hit, and I need to understand that really, really well. And then you can shoot groups.
That's the one that counts, is that first one.
Yeah, exactly. And understanding cold bore, clean, cold clean bore, cold fouled bore, and then the stable zone where we get copper fouling equilibrium. That's where like our fouling has stabilized. It's no longer changing the internal dimensions of the bore significantly enough to change point of impact. So that would be where, maybe I have a multiple target setup and I put it on a piece of cardboard and I go to the range and my left-hand side is top left or left-hand side. My first one is my cold clean bore or my cold foul bore. Boom. I shoot just one shot on that left-hand side. And then I group the rifle on the next one beside it. And then I do it again and again. And what I'll start to build this understanding of how the system is responding to shot count, how much fouling, and what that changes as far as the tracking of my point of impact shift. Am I hitting where I'm aiming? And group size. And I want to track that because I want to know and understand that very well because then you know what your rifle's doing at all times. And I like to do that at 100 yards. And the reason is if I start, it's good to shoot steel far, but I'm always it's like your dry fire. It's like your sets. You're shooting with your bow certain distances every time. It's like a metric of your skill. It's a metric of how well you're shooting that day. This is a metric of how am I shooting? How's my rifle grouping? And how close am I to my point of aim? And do I have a point of impact shift? So at 100 yards, it's very easy to understand and track a rifle zero. And any point of impact shift, whether that's temperature of the barrel, temperature of the environmental conditions, temperature of the ammunition, and like I said, just understanding and determining my maintenance and cleaning regimes. What is that doing to my rifle every time I go to the bench? Like when I clean out my rifle, what is that first shot? Where does that go? What is it doing? And then at 100 yards, the projectile is a lot less susceptible to environmental condition changes, temperature, wind, muzzle velocity changes, allowing the ability to track and monitor for training practices and rifle precision. So as I'm doing this, it also is a good indication once I get to like 1,500 rounds through the barrel, 2,000 rounds, if I'm shooting a lot, to know like, okay, it's on average, it's only grouping like 3/4 MOA. Like it's getting close to maybe that's your point where you're like, okay, it's no longer meeting my accuracy standards and precision standards. Maybe it's time to get a new barrel ordered, right? Because it can take time to get a new barrel in, right? So it could take a couple months. So you just want to make sure you're tracking that. And that's where that comes down to, like we were saying, just making sure that we are monitoring, tracking, and accounting for as much as we can to understand the rifle as a system. And then again, it allows us to determine the maintenance, cleaning procedures, and copper fouling levels of the rifle and its effect on that bore. What is it doing? Like when we hit like 50 rounds down the rifle without cleaning, does my accuracy open up like this? Maybe, right? Every single rifle, every single barrel is different. So you have to do this and listen to what's going on.
That's the time
Listen to the
component.
gun. Yeah, that's the time behind the rifle that determines that. And once you start doing that, you can start adjusting for and understanding copper fouling equilibrium, when you're tracking your point of impact shift. At what point is that stable zone where nothing changes? That's your operating zone. Sometimes with some guns is you got to shoot 5 down the barrel before it even groups. Sometimes it's like with the real custom knife stuff. Usually that cold clean bore shot is within the group, and that's what you're paying for. It doesn't shift. It's always there. Boom, boom, boom. And then, that's what you're getting, like you're paying for that level of adaptability and precision because those match barrels, they are not they're not as susceptible to stress in the steel and the grain of the steel of the barrel. So that's another thing. And then chronographing should be done in the stable zone as well. So we do want to know our cold clean bore shot, and we probably want to know what that is for chronographing, like what the speed of that first shot is. But just making sure that we understand that, because if we're using higher performance cartridges, like example would be like magnums with mass overbores, like a 28 Nosler, maybe a 7 PRC, stuff that's fast like that, that's like a smaller diameter bullet. That's going to be more intense. The changes to the internal bore dynamics is going to happen at a higher level, and that's because there's probably going to be a higher level of heat and higher level of copper deposition. So really making sure that we're chronographing in that stable zone is going to be important, because that could speed up or slow down. But usually it speeds up because you have smaller diameter, because you have fouling and more friction in there. Just to understand the subsequent shot to shot changes as you get to a higher round count. And that's important so that when you go out and hunt or you go to make a really far shot, you're going to get a first round impact. You don't have to walk it on target, right, from changes. So you'll be like, okay, so my cold clean bore, if I don't know that it's slower than a fouled, I could hit low because maybe it's a little slower, a little faster, some other uncontrollable thing, right? So it's again, it's just that's kind of the trend of what we're talking about, is controlling what we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's a good place to
Yeah, I think
end
so.
tonight's conversation and
I
get
think
into
so.
the nitty-gritty later on.
Yeah, some of the next things we'll be talking about on some more podcasts be like, what do we do for reloading, tracking point of impact shift, ballistic profiles, whether we're using, laser etch turrets, ballistic calculators, and how that really determines the way that we get information and get bullets down on target quickly and efficiently. Trajectory validation. There's going to be a whole bunch of stuff like cleaning, rifle cleaning maintenance. We're going to do an episode on that type of stuff. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's we're getting into the nitty gritty of this. We're going to try and get these podcasts out really quick, just so that people can just listen and kind of follow along. And if they need to, they can revert back to it if they are doing a low workup, or they're trying to figure out how they want to set up their rifle. And again, don't be afraid to reach out, send us a message on Instagram if you want to know something, or you want a topic covered, or maybe just even a question. We'll definitely cover that. And like I say, we're still covering archery. We're just trying to hammer through these long range topics. And then we're going to be getting into, 3D target, getting into some of the tips and tricks that Pete's been learning as he's been going through this evolution of building up his next target bow and Ironman debrief and all this stuff. And then
we're just trying not to jump around. We're trying to, if the people who are listening and really want to learn this stuff, try to stay on topic so that, especially if you are reverting back, it's going to be episode such and such to such and such, and you can go in there and we'll always, be back and forth and stuff, but at least this series can kind of stay together. And then, then we'll be, try to get into bear hunting and stuff like that too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
We'll get back into all that. We're just trying to give people something that they haven't gotten from us for a while here and forever. never
Yeah.
gone into the weeds with this stuff here on this
Yeah.
podcast. So I'm learning lots too. I'm not a huge rifle guy. I love shooting rifles. Um, yeah, it's enjoyable to. I mean, it's over my head most of it, but I understand the concepts of it. It's not my first time hearing it and stuff, but
Yeah.
it's always neat hearing the nitty gritty stuff and knowing what goes into it.
Yeah, it's kind of personally reinvigorating a passion for it. I've been kind of shooting everything with pointy sticks, but
It's my
I
turn
got
to
all
do
these
that.
nice
You go
setups.
back
Yeah,
to
like I just want to shoot it with a bow and arrow. It's just everything's bow, but yeah, man, I really appreciate these conversations because it gets me reinvigorated. Just
good.
thinking about it. I'm getting back to reloading again. Like it's good.
That's awesome. And off air here, Derek's always sending me pictures of what he's doing, whether he's doing something with his barrel or, getting back into reloading or prepping for reloading and stuff.
Yeah,
And the questions are coming from me to him, being like, dude, what are you doing right now?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to learn along the way. That's for sure.
Well, guys, thanks for tagging along and listening in. And like I say, we'll have plenty more where this came from. And yeah, it's a good place to
Sounds
end
good.
her.
Appreciate it. Have a good one, guys.
Have a good one.